Hello there! In today's What If, we're going to answer a slightly different question to normal. Normally I do reasonably serious questions, and they've been suggestions from you guys, and this was still a suggestion from one of you guys, but it's a bit different. It's, what if Anakin was shot by that battle droid, you know the one that he deflects the blaster bolt back to in Revenge of the Sith, when he's on Mustafar killing the Separatists. What if he was actually shot by that battle droid? So yeah, suggestion from one of you guys. Thanks for the suggestion. Leave suggestions of your own in the comments. And without further ado, let's go on with the video. I think you probably know the scene, the one where Anakin is sent by Palpatine to kill the Separatist Council on Mustafar. And just like in the film, Anakin would enter the room in which the Separatist leaders were in and would begin to cut down the members of the Council. The Separatist Council, not the Jedi Council. Cutting through each of them, Vader would have to keep reminding himself of what these people had done, the pain they'd caused to fuel his anger, to prevent his years of training as a Jedi, the compassion he was trained to have for all beings, from causing a wave of guilt over him. Vader's anger would continue to grow until his vision would become blurred, partly by tears and partly by pure rage, motivating his every action. Guided by the dark side, he would identify his victims more by the fear that he could sense in them than his actual eyesight. One by one, he would be able to sense the fear in each Separatist vanish as they died, and then he would realise that what Tambor was trying to hide in the room next door. It's worth noting at this point that Vader would still value life in general. He hadn't been a Sith for very long, and so he would still have a lot of his humanity. And so Vader, when he sensed Wat, would remember all of the pain that Wat had caused, and the way in which he had no regard for life. Rage would overcome the new Sith, and his only focus would be on ending Wat. But in that moment, Vader would fail to sense the B1 Battle Droid behind him until it was too late. The droid would shoot Vader in the back. Still blinded by rage, Vader would continue, but again the droid would shoot, again and again and again, until not even his rage could sustain his body, and Vader would collapse, dead. After the shock in the room had subsided and the remaining council members had begun to come to terms with their rather unlikely survival and more unlikely hero, they would begin to discuss how they should proceed. Now, a quick check of Wikipedia seems to suggest that there are only 3 remaining council members at this point: Wat Tambor, Rune Harko, and Nute Gunray. Now, Vader doesn't actually speak in that scene, and he uses a blue lightsaber, so the council, or what was left of them, would quickly come to the conclusion that Vader had in fact been a Jedi who had deceived Sidious, and so they would decide that they should probably call Sidious to inform him that a Jedi had attacked them. Sidious would initially assume, when he saw the face of Nute on the hologram, that Vader had got stuck in space traffic, hadn't reached Mustafar yet. But once they had explained the situation, he would reach out with the Force and realise that Vader had truly been killed. Thinking quickly, he would say that due to this Jedi's assassination attempt, he would personally travel to meet them to discuss their next move, although secretly he would intend to finish what Vader hadn't been able to, killing the Separatists. He would just be about to leave for Mustafar, but would be stopped by Yoda, just like in Revenge of the Sith. And just like in the film, Yoda and Obi-Wan would have decided that Yoda needed to stop the Emperor and Obi-Wan needed to stop Vader. So Palpatine would fight Yoda just like in Revenge of the Sith, whilst Obi-Wan hid on Padme's ship to go and face Vader. Once they reached Mustafar, Anakin would not be there to meet Padme, only R2, so Padme would venture into the mining facility along with the 2 droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO, and Obi-Wan would follow, staying out of sight, where the droids and Padme were unaware of his presence. Padme would reach the room with the Separatists in, or what was left of them, and after a very confused pause after she entered, whilst everyone present tried to work out exactly what was going on, Nute Gunray would speak. Now Nute would think that when Sidious had promised him peace, that he meant a Separatist victory, and would ask the senator who had just walked in whether she was the Republic's ambassador who had come to negotiate their surrender. After another moment, whilst Padme tried to comprehend exactly what the Viceroy had just said, C-3PO would begin to pronounce that that would be impossible due to the Republic now not even being a republic. It was an empire. At which point Nute would interrupt the droid and say that Sidious would know what to do with the 3 of them, and they should be taken prisoner. However, at this point, Obi-Wan would decide that he'd heard enough, having heard the previous conversations, and would walk out, standing in front of Padme and the droids. He would say that he didn't know what Nute had heard, but Darth Sidious was the former Supreme Chancellor and now the Emperor. After probably quite a while of back and forth discussion in which Obi-Wan tried to explain the situation, they would be interrupted by Padme rushing over to the body of Vader, as she would just have noticed it. She would, after realising he was dead, draw her blaster and would say that he was dead, and would accuse the Separatists of killing him. Again, again, argument would ensue as Newt accused Anakin of being a Jedi assassin, and Obi-Wan would just try to prevent everyone from shooting everyone else. Eventually, during a lull in the argument, Obi-Wan would explain that Sidious had clearly played both sides from the beginning, and that seeing as it was him who had probably sent Anakin to Mustafar, it would probably be in their common interest to all evacuate the planet as soon as possible and continue their little debate away from a place where a Sith could potentially show up any minute and kill all of them. That was if Yoda hadn't been successful in his battle against Sidious. The remaining 3 separatists, the ones who were still alive, would briefly glance at one another, aware that if Obi-Wan was telling the truth, then they should definitely go with him. It would be far wiser than staying to confront a Sith. However, if he was lying, then they should definitely stay on Mustafar, or better yet, kill or capture the Jedi. Rune would step forward along with Wat, and would agree to go with the Jedi, as both would merely just want to survive at this point. However, Newt would refuse due to his greater amount of interaction with Sidious. He would call the other 2 separatists traitors, and say that he would tell Sidious of their foolish decision. And so Padme, who would be beginning her labour, would begrudgingly allow Rune and Wat onto her ship, along with Obi-Wan, R2-D2 and C-3PO, leaving an angry Newt Gunray and any remaining droids behind. Well, except one B1 Battle Droid, who would, unbeknown to anyone, stow aboard Padme's ship. And so Obi-Wan would take Padme along with their other passengers on the ship to Polis Massa, just like in Revenge of the Sith. And since Padme hadn't actually been injured by Anakin, or even seen the man she loved go down a path that she couldn't follow, she wouldn't die in childbirth. And whilst she recovered from childbirth, following the delivery of Luke and Leia, Yoda and Obi-Wan and Bail would have a rather tense discussion with the 2 separatists who had agreed to come with Obi-Wan. The Jedi would primarily be interested in what the separatists knew about the Sith. Bail would primarily be concerned about whether the 2 were trustworthy, and the Separatists would have the same concern about their new associates. After an hour or so of very little progress for anyone, Padme would interrupt them all, saying she didn't want to be left out of the conversation, and so they would continue discussing with Padme now. The issue would be that the Jedi and Senators knew that the 2 Separatists had been responsible for many atrocities during the war, and would want justice. However, Wat and Rune both knew about the Separatists, and more importantly, about Sidious. The Jedi would want this information, as they would want to learn as much about the Jedi's mortal enemy, the Sith, as possible, whereas Padme and Bail would be more interested in compiling a list of Sidious's crimes to try and spark political opposition in the Senate. Eventually, it would be agreed, with a lot of convincing from the Jedi, that Bail would return to Alderaan and hide Wat there, while Padme would do the same for Rune on Naboo, the logic being that splitting the 2 up would attract less attention, and each of the 2 Jedi would also accompany one of the Separatists and one of the Senators, to act as a combination of a bodyguard, a prison guard, and an interrogator for them. And so, Yoda, Bail and Wat would travel to Alderaan, whilst Padme, Obi-Wan, Luke, Leia, R2-D2, C-3PO and Rune would all travel to Naboo. Oh, and a certain B1 Battle Droid who had stayed aboard the starship the whole time. So Rune and Wat would end up hiding from the Empire on worlds that had been their enemies for multiple years. Now what about Newt? Well, put very simply, he would experience quite a shock when it turned out that the Jedi had actually been telling the truth. And so, after Sidious had killed Newt, he would announce to the galaxy that there were still 2 Separatist leaders alive, and that they needed to be captured as soon as possible, as if they remained at large they could threaten the fledgling Empire by reforming a droid army, which would not be true and Palpatine would know it. But Palpatine isn't exactly known for telling the truth. Palpatine would be more concerned about the information that the Separatists held about him. This announcement would eventually reach Wat and Rune, who would, as a result, be more forthcoming with information as they would now know the truth about Sidious. They would now know that Newt had been killed, and that they should trust the Jedi. The Jedi wouldn't learn much useful information from Wat and Rune, as they wouldn't exactly know much about the hooded hologram. However, Bail and Padme would learn of many moral atrocities committed by Palpatine, and would begin to circulate rumours around the Imperial Senate, whilst also asking the Jedi to investigate these crimes to find hard evidence so that they could maybe begin to cause opposition in the Senate. Unfortunately for what you could call the beginning of a rebellion, Palpatine would also have people investigate where these rumours were coming from. He would send fallen Jedi, which we shall call Inquisitors for simplicity, to extract information from potential leads. These Inquisitors would quickly find out about the 2 Jedi working for 2 Senators, who some sources would be saying were harbouring the 2 remaining Separatist leaders, the rule of 2. Speaking of the rule of two, Palpatine wouldn't have actually found an apprentice to replace Vader. Initially, this would be due to him being busy with politics, but he would soon come to reason that he didn't need the rule of two anymore, as that was introduced to help the Sith become more powerful whilst in hiding, so that eventually they could achieve what he had now achieved. Also, he didn't really want to spend time training someone who would just eventually try to kill him and take his empire. So for this reason, he wouldn't provide that much training to his Inquisitors, only what he deemed necessary for them to extract information and track down the rumours that were spreading. However, although the Inquisitors and therefore Palpatine would very quickly find out that Yoda and Obi-Wan were very much involved in these rumours, they wouldn't actually be able to find out their location, and although they would be able to narrow down the senators to about a dozen, they would be unable to make further progress, as if they actually entered a senator's home without permission and were caught, it could cause even further hostility from political allies of the senator towards the Empire, and the Empire itself would not have the resources to suppress or prevent lots of unrest. So at least for now, the Empire would still have to respect its Senate and so its senators. So the Inquisitors would decide to try and lure the Jedi to them by pretending to be informants. The plan would then be to capture the Jedi and take them to Palpatine to gain his favour, and so they would start to spread a rumour that there was someone with a holo recording of Palpatine talking to Grievous. It's worth noting that Palpatine wouldn't really have much involvement with his Inquisitors after training them, other than giving them orders to find the remaining Separatists and the Senators hiding them, because he would be concerned about rumours spreading about his dealings with these people who were feared by the galaxy due to their cruelty. He would want to maintain a facade of a wise old man who wanted peace, and unfortunately, just like in any military or political system, there would be some people who took things too far, which he wanted to appear to have nothing to do with to maintain this facade. So Obi-Wan would go to investigate these reports with a droid provided by Padme, not R2 or 3PO because they were too well known by the galaxy. The droid would be there to record anything useful and check that the recording was of Grievous. However, when Obi-Wan arrived, he would be ambushed, and although he would successfully manage to defend himself from, we'll say, the three Inquisitors, and actually manage to gain the upper hand, the Inquisitors would realise that they may be able to just take the droid and use it to find the planet Obi-Wan was hiding on, and so they would do that. They'd take the droid and retreat. Obi-Wan would rush back to Naboo, aware that he had limited time before the Inquisitors arrived and discovered Rune. The Inquisitors would not tell Palpatine yet of the development, as they would agree that if they could kill the Separatist and capture whichever senator the droid belonged to, then they could become Palpatine's favourites and potentially receive more training and command all the other Inquisitors. Unfortunately for Obi-Wan, the Inquisitors would quickly discover the droid's owner and would travel to Naboo just in time to find Obi-Wan and Padme trying to get Rune off-world. Due to Obi-Wan now having to defend Rune and Padme, he would now be unable to gain the upper hand against the three Inquisitors, and so he would activate an emergency beacon which would inform Yoda that he needed assistance, as he would assume Imperial reinforcements were on the way. The Inquisitors would realise that it was only a matter of time before backup arrived for Padme, although they would be more thinking of Naboo security than a Jedi Master. So they would retreat into Theed, and would contact Palpatine, deciding it was probably wise to ask for reinforcements at this point. Palpatine would ask which Jedi was on Naboo, in order to decide how many reinforcements were required, but before the Inquisitor who was contacting Palpatine could actually answer, the hologram would just cut off, and so Palpatine would have no other choice but to assume the worst, that both Jedi were on Theed, and he would actually not be far off because Yoda was travelling to Theed, and so, along with many legions of troopers, Palpatine would personally visit his home planet. Yoda, along with a detachment of Alderaanian guards, would arrive on Naboo from Alderaan, just before an Imperial blockade was set up around the planet, Naboo that is. The Inquisitors would have destroyed the engines on any of the ships in Theed to prevent escape, and so Obi-Wan, Yoda, Padme and Rune, along with a rather small military force formed by security from Naboo and Alderaan, would be trapped by an Imperial blockade. It's worth noting that Yoda and Bail would know that Yoda's transport would be tracked back to Alderaan if Yoda was unsuccessful in defending Rune, and so Padme and Bail would have agreed to only use the emergency beacons as a last resort. Although Yoda, Obi-Wan, Padme, Rune and the security personnel would try to hide, it wouldn't be long before they would be forced further and further back into the palace. At this point, Palpatine would land his shuttle and make his way through his home city to the palace, stopping briefly when he would see the body of an Inquisitor, the Inquisitor who had called him earlier, with a broken holo receiver on the floor. The man would not have died to a lightsaber, but rather to a blaster bolt. Palpatine would dismiss this, knowing that soon this reminder of the past, which had been a thorn in the Empire's side, would be dead. The Republic, the Jedi, the Separatists, they would all be gone. And he would be right. Well, mostly. He, along with many troopers, would reach the Jedi, Padme, and Rune's position, and a fight would ensue. It would be a valiant attempt, mostly from the Jedi, but they would be overwhelmed eventually by the Stormtroopers, 2 Inquisitors because one got shot, and a Sith. And so Yoda, Obi-Wan, Padme, Rune, and the security forces would all be killed, and Palpatine would know that once his forces had dealt with Alderaan, his empire would finally be free from rumours of uprising, and his grip on the galaxy could finally tighten with little concern, especially since he would have been informed that after searching the palace, his forces had found a nurse droid hiding with 2 babies, the children of Vader. He would decide that maybe he would have to reconsider his decision about apprentices, as with these 2 children trained in the dark side, serving him, he would be unstoppable. He would stand in the palace, which he'd spent so much time in, smiling to himself, and would say to what he thought was no one in particular, "I have won, try and stop me." But then, from behind him, the final reminder of the past would step out from the shadows and would respond, "Roger, Roger," and a B1 Battle Droid, yes, that one, would shoot once, killing yet another Sith. And that's how I see Star Wars going if Anakin had been shot by that B1 Battle Droid at the end, kind of near the end of Revenge of the Sith. Now obviously this video isn't supposed to be serious. Obviously Anakin wasn't going to get shot by that B1 Battle Droid, and obviously Palpatine wasn't going to get shot by a B1 Battle Droid, and an Inquisitor probably wouldn't either. But I thought it was a funny video concept, and thanks for the suggestion once again. So give me your suggestions in the comments. Tell me what you think would have happened if Anakin had been shot by this B1 Battle Droid. Remember to like, subscribe, do all of that stuff. Thanks for watching. Bye!